Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and this video is going to show the fastest fully upgraded vehicles in the GTA Online Sports Classics class in terms of lap time. As always, the position counter is in the top left with the best lap time the vehicle achieved in the top right, and for this 2020 series I'll be showcasing the non-raceable vehicles first. So even though, for example, the Ardent is in the Sports Classics class and would be competitive in races, since it can't be used in regular Sports Classic races, it's not going to be included in the main list. We start the regular raceable vehicles list with the Tornado Mariachi in 38th place overall. This video only focuses on track performance, so if you're interested in top speed, where braking, cornering and acceleration aren't relevant, check the link in the description for the top speed testing series, and if you want to know more information about this testing, including the extent to which it's accurate and how useful it is for you personally, have a read of the full description as everything that you need is in there. This video lists all vehicles and is correct as of the Casino Heist update. For any Sports Classics cars added after that or other classes of cars, check the playlist linked in the second line of the description, and feel free to check out my Patreon or become a YouTube member if you want to support this work and get testing results of any new cars a little bit early. So the Sports Classics class, I guess you could divide it into three subclasses, not taking into account the sort of pseudo subclass of the non-raceable vehicles. We've got, at this point, in the first part of the list, we've got the standard classics, what you would consider true classic cars, very slow, things like the Dynasty for example. You're not expecting them to do anything in terms of performance, they're more just about cruising around, not expected to be quick. We've got about 5 different types of Tornado in this sort of mini subclass, if you like. We've got obviously the Tornado Mariachi first of all. That is exactly the same in terms of stats as a regular Tornado, it's just that that one can't be upgraded, but obviously it's a separate thing and you can actually store it in your garage. But yeah, there's lots of different Tornadoes, there's Manana, Peyote, Dynasties, Fagaloas, things like that. All getting through these pretty quickly, because then we get into sort of the second subclass, which I would consider to be the sort of true Sports Classics class, and the sort of the old style of Sports Classics cars before we got all of this new breed of vehicles in the class that have kind of redefined what the class is all about. So we're coming to the end of the first subclass, if you like. We've got the Frankensteiner and the Roosevelt Valor, which is slightly quicker than the Roosevelt, and then we get into quite a big group of cars that are all very, very close in terms of lap time, and that used to be what we would call the Sports Classics class. That was what we would race with. These are all those sort of vehicles, starting with the Stinger here in 25th place overall now. 1 minute 13.2 isn't that quick for a lap time overall when you're comparing it to supercars or sports cars, and a 1 minute 12.9 for the Stinger GT for example. But we're going to see a lot of vehicles around this area that are getting these very same sort of lap times, and to me, this is what the Sports Classics class should be about. This is the kind of level of lap time that Sports Classics cars should have. But none of these cars that we're seeing now that we used to race with all the time and used to be competitive are at all viable in Sports Classic races now, because we've just had so many more additions further on, further up the list. So as we see the JB700 here, I just want to make a little note about the weaponized JB700W. The JB700W is exactly the same as the JB700. So obviously it's a brand new edition, the JB700W. It's got weapons on it, which has long been requested for the regular JB700. And they've basically just done a copy-paste job in terms of performance, in terms of handling stats, all that kind of stuff. It is a carbon copy of the JB700. It gets the same top speed, the same lap time. So in that respect, that's one of the 4 non-raceable vehicles that we're not really missing out on. But obviously, with those 4 non-raceable vehicles, 3 of them in particular, with the Deluxo, the Stromberg, and especially the Ardent, which I'll come on to later on in the video, we aren't able to race those vehicles in regular races just because they've got weapons on them. Obviously, the Deluxo maybe is a little bit tricky with the flying capabilities, but maybe that could be disabled. I'm sure it could be. So yeah, this is the first class where it's a little bit of a shame that we've got some non-raceable vehicles, and certainly some non-raceable vehicles that don't make as much sense as, say, something like in the supercars class when we had the Vigilante and the Scramjet. You can understand why those aren't available in races. Something like the Ardent, can't understand it, but I'll come on to that later on. So, as you might have been paying attention to the lap times, we've seen a big increase into the 1 minute 10 range, and now we're taking another jump to the 1 minute 9.7 range for the Pigali. Really good, the Pigali. It's got good traction around the corners, but it was always slightly bested in races back in the day by the Z-Type, and its lap time does reflect that with a 1 minute 9.3, so it's a couple of tenths of a second quicker. But keep an eye out for the top speed testing video for the Sports Classics class in 2020, because that shows you where the Z-Type is strongest. But now we're starting to move into the sort of the higher class of Sports Classics cars. It ends really at the Z-Type. Maybe you could put the retinue in with that with a 1 minute 8.6, but now we're going to start to see lap times that are significantly quicker than what we previously used to expect. The Z-Type since 2013 was the quickest Sports Classic car in the game, and now we've got, 12 vehicles that are quicker than it. So this is kind of getting into the area of what I would call the super classics. We've got regular classics at the very bottom of the class, then we've got the true Sports Classics in the middle, and then we've got the super classics towards the end. Maybe not so much with these first few, as we just get into the top 10 with the Silvestre there, just sneaks into the top 10, but certainly from this point on, certainly the top 9. Big improvement in lap time straight away to the Viserys with a 1 minute 6.8, so we're talking a second quicker than what we've just seen from the Silvestre, and 2 to 3 seconds quicker per lap from what used to be the previous best of the Z-Type. So we're coming into 8th place with the Swinger with a 1 minute 6.4, and we've got another group of vehicles here that are all very, very close in terms of lap time. Again, it's always sometimes better to actually race with not the top vehicles in a class if you're racing with different, a closed group of people, because there's quite a lot of cars that are all on similar pace. It's just that there's always 1 or 2 cars at the very top. So the Torero here in 7th place is only a tenth of a second quicker than what we saw from the Swinger with a 1 minute 6.3, and then we're gonna go another, I think it's another tenth of a second quicker again with the Retinue Mark II with a 1 minute 6.3, less than a tenth of a second really. Keep in mind that with the Retinue Mark II you do have to have maximum suspension and have that ridiculous looking camber to make it go as quickly as possible around the corners. That's something new for the Casino Heist DLC, but yeah, it's still a quick vehicle, and then it's only a sort of half a tenth of a second slower than just making it, just misses out on that top 5. Only half a tenth of a second slower than the Infernus Classic, which is in 5th place overall for the Sports Classics class, and we are well into the sort of super classics, if you like. Now, a 1 minute 6.2 is a very, very good lap time. That would be, well, it wouldn't be competitive in the sports class, but it would certainly be able to compete with a lot of standard sports cars like Banshees, things like that. 4th place is the Sterling GT. This is what came along and absolutely demolished the Sports Classics class. We used to just have the Z-Type at the top of the class, and then this came along and beat it by about 4 seconds. Now we've got a lot of cars around it. It's only a tenth of a second quicker than what we just saw from the Infernus Classic, so again it rounds out that sort of group that are split by like half a second quite nicely. Still good competitive time. And then the top 3 separate themselves a little bit from that. With a Rapid GT Classic and 1 minute with a 1 minute 5.7, we've seen maybe half a second separating the last 5 cars. Now we're going just under another half a second to 3rd place between the Sterling GT and the Rapid GT Classic. The problem with the Rapid GT Classic is that it can't really compete with the top 2, and as is usually the case with these kind of these class systems, there's always 1 or 2 cars that are just far and away better than everything else, and we're going to take a decent jump in lap time from the Rapid GT Classic in 3rd place to our 2nd place vehicle, which is the Cheetah Classic. So the Cheetah Classic is 2nd place overall, dips into the 1 minute 4 lap time, so it's not far off being in a full second per lap quicker than the Rapid GT Classic. You can certainly compete with the Rapid GT Classic, but you really you want one of the top 2. So Cheetah Classic is a very, very good vehicle, and a 1 minute 4 lap time is definitely in, decent sports car level of lap time. We're talking, Feltzers, Massacros, Jesters, things like that from the regular sports class. That's what these sports classics cars are doing now, and that's why I would consider these to be the sort of super classics. They're not really sports classics, but ultimately the Cheetah Classic does get beaten by the Turismo Classic. At this point, feel free to subscribe if you haven't already for regular lap time and top speed testing videos and updates when new cars are released, and check out other classes in the playlist. But ultimately the Turismo Classic is the one to choose for sports classics class races. You can certainly compete with the Cheetah Classic, but in general the Turismo just has a little bit of extra speed, a little bit of extra acceleration, a little bit of extra grip in the corners. The Turismo Classic is basically just a slightly better version of the Cheetah Classic, and the lap time kind of shows that, being a further 4 or 5 tenths of a second per lap quicker. And considering we started this video with lap times from the Tornadoes of around the 1 minute 25, 1 minute 30 range, and now we're up to the 1 minute 4 range. There's a wide variety of vehicles in the Sports Classics class, but ultimately there's only really 2 cars you can use, and as always, in most cases, the Turismo Classic is the one car that you want most of the time. Now, the main problem that I have with the Sports Classics class is the Ardent. The Ardent is the quickest non-raceable vehicle, as we saw from the start of the video. It gets a lap time of 1 minute 5.2, which is still, 7 tenths of a second slower than the Turismo Classic, but the Ardent is a really, really nice car to drive. It's got really good cornering capabilities, certainly on par, if not slightly better than the Turismo Classic. Maybe it lacks a little bit in straight line speed to what the Turismo Classic or the Cheetah Classic could do, but it seems such a shame. I think this is the biggest shame that I can, that I feel strongly about, that a vehicle isn't raceable. The Ardent is only not raceable because it's got a few very weak guns on it, and there's other vehicles in the game, like for example the Comet Safari, that have guns, and you can still use in races because when you take it into a race the guns are just disabled. The Ardent doesn't get that treatment, unfortunately, and it has pretty weak guns, and because of that it's not allowed to be used in Sports Classics races. Even though it would be in 3rd place overall for the class, it's a lovely car to drive in terms of the way that it handles, and it would be very competitive. It's such a shame that we can't use it. To a certain extent, it's also a shame that we can't race with the Deluxo and the Stromberg in regular races, just with their, weapons and crazy flying features disabled. But the Ardent is certainly the one that makes the least sense, because all it's got is a few weak guns that could be disabled if they wanted to make them disabled and make the Ardent usable. So that's pretty much the Sports Classics class all done. That's everything from top to bottom for 2020. Hopefully this has been helpful, and of course feel free to check out the top speed version of this video as well if you want to see how all the Sports Classics cars rank in terms of top speed as well. So that's pretty much it for this one. Consider supporting on Patreon or become a YouTube member if you want to get testing results early. And remember to read the description for more info, comment with your thoughts, like the video if you enjoyed or found it helpful, and subscribe for more. Thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.